Well, it is now August 24th, and that means we are now 7 days away from the start of Carolina football. College football itself has started. That began yesterday with if you want to call them, the week zero games. Certainly had some entertaining ones. Obviously, Farmageddon between Kansas State and Iowa State was very entertaining, but to me, the game of the day yesterday was Stanford and Hawaii. If you didn't get a chance, Hawaii was down late, gets an interception, comes back and kicks two field goals. Outstanding performance by their young quarterback. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But that being said, it is now Sunday, August 24th, 2025. So that means we are now 7 days away from Carolina football kicking off in Atlanta against Virginia Tech. Still no word on Rasul Faison, which is very frustrating and disappointing at the same time. You would have expected something by now, considering the paperwork was handed in January. Even if the answer was no, I think that would be better than just sitting here completely in the dark, waiting and waiting, not knowing whether or not he is going to be eligible 7 days from now. That being said, I think you have to start, if you're Shane Beamer, preparing for the Virginia Tech game like he is not going to be in the lineup. I think about this situation, and I think back immediately to 2 years ago when you had basically an exodus from the program from a lot of guys who were starting. Jaheim Bell and Marshawn Lloyd come to mind immediately. Lloyd left, and he would have been the bell cow of that team, no question about it. And when he left, it put Beamer and the rest of the coaching staff in a very precarious position. They looked at DeCarrion Joyner and said, well, we've moved you to receiver. You had a good transition there. Let's move you to running back for 1 year and just see how it goes. And it was just an absolute disaster. He didn't make it the whole season. Mario Anderson actually ended up starting in his place for the majority of the season, and it still wasn't really what you would want. No offense to Anderson, but he's just, and I've said this many times, he is just not an SEC back. He ended up at Memphis last year, which I think going from Newberry to FBS football, I think that is probably a better fit for him. However, that being said, if Rasul Faison cannot go, Carolina is honestly, I think, okay at the running back position. Certainly you've got Oscar Attaway, who is likely going to start regardless. Then there is also Jerwan Howell, who had a pretty solid game against Illinois in the Citrus Bowl last year, aside from a very costly fumble late in the game, which I think ended up turning the game. But other than that, he ran pretty well. And then the enigma of this is Isaiah Augustave. He transferred over, as many know, from Colorado. He's still got 2 years of eligibility left. This guy, I think, although he's only been on campus now for a month or so, he could be a guy that could come in and turn some heads and make big plays in some key situations, if you will. I think that he is going to probably surprise a few people, even if Faison can go. But if not, I think you look at a guy like this, 6'2", 210 pounds, one of those Florida backs coming from Colorado, I think he can potentially be an impact player. I think back, you compare 2 years ago to this situation right now with the running game. One thing that Carolina has right now that is not being taken, I think, fully into consideration and certainly not being appreciated enough is Lenoris Sellers' running ability. Certainly with question marks at the running back position, you wonder where you're going to get production in the ground game from. Regardless, I think that it will be handled a lot by number 16. I think that offensive coordinator Mike Shula doesn't want to necessarily lean on him the way that Carolina might have, especially early in the season last year. But I think that you certainly can if you're having trouble with the running game, if the backs aren't getting it, or if you need another back there. Sellers kind of works in a way as another running back. In certain situations, if you want to call a quarterback draw, you are not going to be kind of hamstrung by an immobile quarterback. As we all know, Lenoris is probably one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the game right now. When you say a dual threat, oftentimes people think, well, dual threat just means running quarterback. Lenoris is a true dual threat where he can beat you with both his legs and his arm. This young man has a true cannon. He is right up there in terms of arm strength, right there with Spencer Rattler, Steven Garcia, Todd Ellis. Take your pick. Lenoris is right up there, and he has a plethora of weapons to throw to. They're not hurting in the wide receiver room. No question about that. Obviously, it starts with Mazeo Bennett. Certainly, Nick Harbor gets a lot of the press because of his speed and what he was rated on the video game, and the fact that he was voted Freak of the Year, number one freak in all of college football 2 years in a row, and this year number 3. But I think with Mazeo Bennett, I think that is probably who you might be trusting a little bit more because he's had a little bit more production, a little bit more experience playing wide receiver, and he came along a lot quicker last year than Harbor did, and that was Harbor's second year. But let's go ahead and focus in on Nick Harbor, 6'5", 235. This guy, I think, is going to benefit probably more from having his first spring after a couple of years. It's going to be a lot like Steven Garcia was. Obviously different position, but when you saw Garcia come in to the 2009 season after finally having a full spring, the light kind of clicked. And, I don't know what Garcia would say about that, but nevertheless, I think the light is really going to click this year for Harbor. I think that they saw something last year with him. Again, 6'5", 235, and yes, he does have freakish speed, but when you are that big, use your size as a weapon. And really, when we saw them do that last year was the first time I really noticed it. Of course, he had that big catch against Alabama that came oh so close to tying the ball game with a failed 2-point conversion. But when I really noticed last year that Harbor was being used the way you would expect a guy who's 6'5", 235 to be used, where he can catch the ball and then start running people over, was against Vandy. And last year, from that moment on, you kind of just saw him come on as a guy that, they are going to start depending on not just with the speed, but also with the size. If you want to run, a quick slant and then have him truck over a safety, he is certainly capable of doing that. But he will not be the only. Those two will not be the only ones that Lenoris Sellers will be relying on. Obviously, Vendrevious Jacobs is back, but let's get in on these freshmen that a lot has been made of so far. I think the one that has been turning the heads the most this camp has been Donovan Murph, freshman out of Irmo. I think that he, and a lot of this is still in just, skill players versus air. But nevertheless, it seems like he is coming along in his development very well. I think that he is a guy that they're going to start going to a little more. Same thing can be said for, Lex Cyrus, Malik Clark, or Jaden Sellers. These guys, I think, are going to be the real deal. Brian Rowe, certainly have been hearing a lot about him. But don't forget about some of the other guys that are back. Jared Brown had a huge game last year against Missouri. He had that catch and run on a screen pass that he took, I don't know how many yards it was, but he took it a long way. Vendrevious Jacobs is back. looking down the line here. So the wide receiver position, Jordan Gidron, it's a very formidable group that they're taking to Atlanta next week. Looking forward to seeing what some of these newer guys can do, as well as the experienced guys. One of the big question marks right now for the offense is probably the tight end position. Understandable, because you lose so much production with Joshua Simon last year. But let's not sleep on what Michael Smith did last year. Let's not sleep on what Brady Hunt did last year. Both had big games against Missouri. Both had pretty strong seasons last year with Carolina. I think that seeing both back for their second seasons, you're going to be very impressed with what they bring to the table. So, Jordan Dingle's in. He came in from Kentucky. Mo Brown is back as well. So it's a very deep group. Do we have a true number one tight end like we've had over the last couple of years, whether it be Bell, whether it be Trey Knox, or whether it be Joshua Simon? The answer to that is, well, right now, no. We don't know what we're getting right now out of that group as far as who is going to kind of take the bull by the horns and be the leader, be that kind of the easy button. I don't know if there will be one. If I were to place a wager on it, I'd say Michael Smith. So it's going to be curious to see just how they're used early on. Obviously, the offensive line returns a good solid amount, and of course have picked up a lot. So that group is going to be looked at. I think Kason Henry is probably one guy that many people are looking at. Trevon Ball, Tree Babalade. It is a good group, and they've had their moments, certainly, but they've also had their moments where you say, ugh. And that's pretty typical. I mean, just about every position group has that, but I think this group in particular is going to give you a solid output. I've heard comparisons so far to 2014's offense. Maybe if you get that production out of the offense, that would be very nice. Looking on the other side of the ball, though, I've also heard people say they get 2014 vibes. I can understand why that group lost so much, especially up front. But, the thing that is really concerning right now is more so than anything the edge position. There have been quite a few injuries that have stacked up so far at that with that group. One name that you haven't heard on that list, knock on wood, is Dylan Stewart. Certainly he is going to be the focal point of that group. You've got Desmond Eubank. Damon Clowney is in. There are a lot of good edge rushers with this group that even though right now Brian Thomas, you think about just Jatius Gear, as I'm looking through the lineup right now, this is a good group that they're taking to Atlanta, even though a lot of them are kind of have already been bitten by the injury bug. Nevertheless, though, it's a very decent group to take. It's certainly not going to be last year. And I've said this so many times. It is unfair to expect the same kind of production out of this group that you got out of last season's group. That being said, though, I look at the secondary and I'm actually pretty confident. You've got a lot of talent and experience back there. Brandon Cisse, he's somebody that I think this program is going to depend on. He is a junior from who came out of NC State. He's actually originally from Sumter. I believe his brother Cedric is on this team as well. How much he is going to contribute, I don't know. But you also have Judge Collier back. You have DQ Smith back. There is a good amount of experience returning. The Kilgores are back. So you look to hope that this group will be able to kind of put Virginia Tech in a little bit of in situations throughout the game that they don't want to be in. Kyron Jones for Virginia Tech has obviously played a lot of football. We don't know exactly what we're getting, as it's been stated by many that uh, Virginia Tech is unveiling new offenses and defenses because they're unveiling new offensive and defensive coordinators. What will that mean for this team? Hard to say, and week one is just so hard to predict. The thing you feel comfortable with if you're Carolina is that you return a good core of what you were successful with last year, particularly on offense. Virginia Tech, Brent Pry so far, and I think most Virginia Tech people, and maybe even Pry himself, would admit he has underachieved so far. There's a little motivation, I think, for Shane Beamer in this game. Virginia Tech is his alma mater. I don't know how much that really plays into it. I hope that they'll come out and be as fired up to play against Virginia Tech next Sunday in Atlanta as they were when they came out like gangbusters in Norman last year and just took it to Oklahoma and had that game won in the first 5 minutes. I think the key for this, and a lot of people would say you would want your team to win the coin toss and then defer to the second half. Should Carolina win the coin toss and take the ball, I don't know if I would be all that upset about it, because you want to get off to a fast start. You want to give your defense, who is the least experienced group on your team, well, aside from special teams, you want to take that first possession and you want to just drive right downfield and put 7 on the board, which would be ideal. In an ideal world, that's what happens, but very, very little does that actually happen. And with a brand new special teams unit, you certainly hold your breath, especially early in the season, because you just don't know what you're going to be getting. So you hope that the offense can go out, make some big plays, get you a good lead early. The defense can do their thing, get some confidence going, and hopefully, have a solid cushion at the end of the first quarter. That being said, I think that this is probably going to be a dogfight. I just don't see how this is going to be one of those games that gets out of hand early. Virginia Tech, Brent Pry is a Virginia Tech alum, so, he's a Virginia Tech guy. He is going to be one of those lunch pail guys. His teams will bring it. They will be fired up to play for sure, and it's just going to be an interesting situation to be in. I think now we turn our attention to maybe the most distressing news that has come out of fall camp so far, and that is the status of Travian Robertson. 2 days ago, at about 5:45 in the morning up in Chapin, Robertson was driving on the highway, and someone just basically came into his lane, and it's hard to say exactly what happened. Not much has been released yet, but there was a head-on collision. Robertson is in the hospital right now. The driver of the other vehicle was actually killed on site, which is certainly a very concerning situation. You just care so much for a guy like Travian Robertson, who is Carolina full. He is in stable condition right now as we speak. You just hope that his condition continues to improve and that he will be able to, at some point, get back on the sidelines. I don't think he will be capable of going to Atlanta, and that's okay. You just hope and pray for a speedy recovery and that he can get back to being his regular self, and he can get back on the sidelines being that fiery, intense guy that fans love seeing, and you just hope for the best in that situation. You hope it won't be too much of a distraction right now for the team, but the most important thing still is that Travian is okay. It looks like he's going to be okay and be able to make a recovery, so we'll just have to keep an eye on that going forward. We look to hear from Shane Beamer. I haven't looked at the schedule yet to see what this week is going to be like, because the game is on Sunday and not Saturday. If it was Saturday, you would typically expect Shane's press conference to be on Tuesday. I haven't looked yet to see if that's the case, if it will be Tuesday or if they're going to have kind of like what they used to do in the old days when Carolina led the season off every year on Thursday night. If they're going to move each day of game prep back and have the press conference for Shane Beamer and the players on Wednesday and assistant coaches on Thursday, we don't know yet, or I don't know yet. Once we get past those press conferences, we'll meet back again and just kind of close out here the rest of Virginia Tech week. But it is great that college football is finally back and we can start focusing on the thing that we truly love, and looking forward to seeing the team that we love to watch come out to 2001. It's going to be fun, obviously, because you've got the battle of what a lot of people will say the two best entrances in college football. No doubt Atlanta will pipe in both Enter Sandman and 2001 for both programs. Looking forward to that. Just cannot wait to get to Atlanta, and can't wait to see what this team looks like. So, again, going to keep an eye on Travian Robertson's condition, and going to keep an eye on Faison watch for now. But as we sit here on August 24th, 2025, if I were a betting man, I would say he's not going to be cleared by opening day. Hopefully he will, and I'm wrong, but that remains to be seen, and we're just going to have to go forward and see what the rest of the running back room can do. Until then, we will be back later in the week and get on with more game week as we move closer and closer to opening day against Virginia Tech.